Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video. This one's going to be all about Avatar Kuruk, what we knew about him from before the novels, what we know about him now because of the novels, and how that has completely changed our opinion on the character. This topic was chosen by one of my new patrons, Nicholas, and just to explain that a little bit more, if you become a patron of mine at the $5 tier or higher, one of the bonuses is that you do get to choose the topic for an upcoming Avatar discussion topic video, which is what Nicholas did here. I gave him the option and he chose an Avatar topic, and specifically he wanted my thoughts on Kuruk, specifically with the information from the novels included. So that's what I'm doing here. So if you are interested in that, having a specific Avatar discussion topic that I may not cover, the best way to get that is to join on the Patreon at the $5 tier or higher, and that way I will do it. But yeah, link in the description to my Patreon if you want to check out that and all the details surrounding it. But yeah, let's get straight into this. The way I'm going to do this video is that I'm going to start off with a recap of the information about Kuruk that we had before the novels. Then I'm going to go into kind of a recap of what we learned about Kuruk from the novels, and then the discussion part of the video is more so going to be about how do we connect those last little bits of information from both sides of the story together, because the novel does a great job at bringing most of it together, but it does leave a few little bits kind of unattached. So we're going to try and bring it all together and discuss some of the key topics from Kuruk's life, because he ends up having a very, very interesting life. A lot of it because of what's presented in the novels. So let's get into it here. So the first time Kuruk is ever sort of alluded to, he's not mentioned by name, but retroactively we find out that this event is directly referring to him, is in 120. So Book 1 Water, Episode 20, Siege of the North, Part 2. Aang goes to see Ko. Of course, he's looking for the location of the ocean and moon spirit, and he's told to go to see Ko, an old spirit who may know about this. So when he arrives in there, Ko says, "My old friend the Avatar, it's been a long time." Aang says, "You know me?" And Ko answers, "How could I forget you? One of your previous incarnations tried to slay me nearly 800 or 900 years ago." Aang says, "I didn't know that. Why did he, or I, try to kill you?" "Oh, it was something about stealing the face of someone you loved. Of course, that's all behind us. Why should I hold a grudge against you for something in a past life? After all, you're a different person now. You've come to me with a new face." So that's a very, very interesting one. Back when this happened, of just like, this is so interesting. A spirit talking about an encounter with one of Aang's previous lives. We later find out this is directly Ko. Ko talking about an encounter with Kuruk. He is the only Avatar we know who has ever tried to kill Ko. And while the dates are wrong, the years here are wrong, it wasn't 800 or 900 years ago. It was more like 400 to 500 years ago would be the correct way to say it, like that. Obviously, for a spirit like him, who's like immortal, has been around for a very long time, thousands upon thousands of years, being off by like, what is it, like 300-400 years or something like that, it's not a horrible mistake, but it speaks to, again, we're still relatively early in Avatar: The Last Airbender. They don't have everything properly fleshed out just yet, as evidenced by the fact that, like, the whole reason Kyoshi is 230 years old is because of a mistake with the dates initially, and they just had to commit to it. Similar thing here, where you just have to be like, Ko has lived so long, he mistakes how long ago it was, and he gets it off by about 400 years. But it is that event, because immediately he shows us Umi's face, which is Kuruk's wife, confirming that that is in fact the exact same event, and it's definitely not 800 or 900 years ago. We can do the math, we can work it out. It's not that, but it works roughly. So that's very cool that even before he's named, he gets a little bit of a story. Ko took his wife's face, and in revenge for that, Kuruk tried to kill him. And then, in between book 2 and 3 of Avatar, is set this webcomic called Escape from the Spirit World. It used to be a game on Nick.com, but they put it on the DVD and the Blu-ray as just a, like, what is it, 13-minute sort of webcomic style thing. And it obviously focuses on Aang meeting Roku, then Kyoshi, then Karuk, then Yang Chen in an effort to reconnect to the Avatar spirit in the aftermath of him being shot down by Azula. So he does that by making a connection with his previous 4 lives, and that is why the Avatar state can still even be a thing going into Book 3. So it plays an important role. But, notably at the very end of Escape from the Spirit World, it is noted that, Aang, you will not remember what you have just experienced today. So, he meets these past lives, we as the audience get to meet them, but this explains why then he sort of acts like he's meeting Karuk for the first time in the finale of the show. But anyway, it's still a very important piece of content, so we'll skip straight away to the Karuk stuff. So, after meeting Kyoshi, he goes to visit Karuk, and he immediately encounters this like giant, large water tribe man with a polar bear dog skin on his head, and Aang is like freaked out, scared, like, oh no, has Ko stolen your face too? Like, you have, and replaced it with a polar bear dog? And Karuk's just like, relax kid, I'm not going to hurt you. Now tell me, have you seen a beautiful woman with long brown hair around here? He's looking for Umi still. Who we just saw before, of course. And he then explains like his backstory. About when I was young, each of the avatars talk about a mistake that they made in their life. And for Karuk, this is his big mistake. I traveled the world challenging other benders to tests of strength. And we see him here winning a test of strength at earthbending against this really big, muscly earthbender guy. Highlighting his skill level and how skilled he was. He also challenges people to Agni Kais. Except in this case, it's just a random Fire Nation citizen who was just going to the store. They don't imply that like he forced him into a fight, but just that Karuk would very much go around the place, just looking for these sparring matches with whoever he could, always trying to like improve himself and test himself against other people. That's just the type of character that he was. We also see that he was a little bit of a show-off as well, as we see here, him showing off an impressive airbending technique to all the lady airbenders here, and they obviously like him, so he had a very good relationship with the women of the world, as we sort of find out. But also that he was charismatic. He did draw people towards him. And that's, a skill that he did have. So he had the bending talent. He had the charisma to kind of get people to like him. But he does note here in reflection, I was arrogant, proud, and boastful. And those were sort of problems that he had as the Avatar. That the world was in an era of peace, but he wasn't active as the Avatar. He was more focused on doing this fun stuff and entertaining himself and so on as the Avatar, not on the politics of the world. And it's then noted, as we skip to, he sort of changed when he met the woman that he fell in love with, which was that they met during the New Moon celebration when the sister tribes would come together as one. So again, Karuk is from the Northern Water Tribe, and then we find out here Umi is from the Southern Water Tribe. So they meet at this festival where the two tribes come together. They quickly kind of make a connection, fall in love, and he notes that with Umi in my life, I decided to change my irresponsible ways and settle down. He gives her a betrothal necklace here, asking her to marry him. She agrees, and they are to be married here. It's all going well for Karuk here. He's changed for the better here because of meeting her, and they're about to be married here at the Spirit Oasis, so a very spiritual location here. Avatar's wedding, it's a big event, of course, and we see Umi ready for the wedding here, but tragedy on the day of the wedding. And as Karuk explains here, Umi fell into the spirit pond as if some unseen force pulled her in. She didn't drown, she disappeared into the spirit world. Ko took her to punish me for my past mistakes. So the way we've always interpreted that has been like, oh, Ko took Umi to punish Karuk for not being active as the Avatar and just kind of being a bit arrogant as the Avatar. And I think for a lot of people, they're kind of like, okay, that's fine, but surely there has to be more to it than that. Like, on what authority does, like, Ko have the ability to punish the Avatar necessarily? Shadow of Kyoshi thankfully does give us a new insight into that, which I will get to later on in the video. We're dealing with what we knew at the time right now, which was just this, that okay, inattentive avatar, punished for his arrogance, that sort of thing. That's what we're going for here. He kind of fixed his life, improved, but apparently too late for sort of spirits like Ko. And he notes that every year on the anniversary of our wedding, I travel to the spirit world hoping to save my wife from Ko. So after this event, he every single year went into the spirit world, went to attack Ko. So potentially Ko was attacked by Karuk multiple times. It's at this point Aang remembers, oh, that's what that event was from when I met Ko. I saw her face. He still has her, and this gives Karuk this invigoration. Like, my hunt is not for nothing anymore. Thank you, Aang. My search is not over yet. I will keep hunting Ko until Umi and I are reunited. So it presents this idea of this avatar who, okay, like made his mistakes, was kind of negligent as the avatar, but fixed his life right at the end and was punished then afterwards, and it's just this tragic sort of end. He's this avatar who only lived to be 33 years old, so in the few years after his wedding to Umi, he just devoted his entire life to trying to get her back, and that's how his life came to an end, just in this sadness, this desperate hunt to get Umi back and trying to get revenge against Ko. A very, tragic end to an avatar, knowing that he only lived to be 33. But after this, the next time we see Karuk is in 319, which is Sozin's Comet Part 2, The Old Masters. So Aang wants advice from the past lives about should he or should he not kill Ozai. He goes through the cycle in order, and he eventually gets to Karuk. And Karuk, what Karuk says to Aang here, again, he forgets meeting him before, so they act as if this is them meeting again for the first time. And he says, I am Avatar Karuk. When I was young, I was always a go-with-the-flow kind of avatar. People seemed to work out their own problems, and there was peace and good times in the world. But then, I lost the woman I loved to Ko the Face Stealer. It was my fault. If I'd been more attentive and more active, I could have saved her. Aang, you must actively shape your own destiny and the destiny of the world. So, it's always been this very interesting thing of like, okay, I get it. The whole idea is he considers himself this arrogant avatar who didn't really affect the world that much or wasn't involved in it. But he also says it was a time of peace where people mostly figured out their own problems. Was there anything for him to even get involved in? That's always been the point that I would make even before the books came out, that like, is it fair for Ko to have done what he did just because Karuk wasn't seen as just, going around the place trying to sort things out when there was perhaps no real reason for him to do that. Now, obviously, again, Shadow of Kyoshi does give more context to the stuff that he did miss out on as the Avatar and the stuff that he ended up sort of leaving behind for Kyoshi, but it also presents that, like, when he was inattentive as the Avatar, it's because he's holding back on what he was actually doing as the Avatar. And so, we very much, the story that is presented of Karuk up to now is not the full story at all. We get sort of the tragic ending of his life and the sort of more arrogant and fun earlier days of his life, but they don't really cover a lot of the sort of middle section of his life between all the stuff where he was doing all the bending challenges and then meeting Umi. That's the key part of his life that Shadow of Kyoshi fleshes out on, and we'll get into that once we're finished with this stuff that we knew before the books. So after that, we kind of skip over to Korra. And so the only episode of Korra that Karuk is in, well, he's technically in 2, but he only really talks in 1, and that is Beginnings Part 1. So when Korra is attacked by the Dark Spirit, she washes up on the shores of Bonti Island and is taken care of by the Bonti tribe. They lower her into the spirit water so she can reconnect to the Avatar spirit. Basically, something quite similar to what happened to Aang being shot down by Azula sort of happens to Korra, and she also has to reconnect to her past lives. But whereas Aang had to reconnect to his most recent past lives, Korra has to make the connection on the other side. She has to reconnect with the start of the Avatar cycle. So she goes through the past lives and they remind her of what the Avatar is. And when she gets to Avatar Karuk, he says, you need to go back to the beginning. find Rava. So Karuk is actually the first character in the entire franchise to mention the name of the Avatar spirit as being Rava. And I find that very interesting because in the very same episode, which is the first Korra episode we see Karuk, we also get introduced to Bonti Island, the Bonti tribe, the true fire sages basically here, the really, really spiritual people who know their stuff. This legendary tribe that is known for having all of this incredible knowledge of the spirits, as evidenced by the fact that earlier on in this episode, the shaman healer analyzed Korra with her sort of special firebending technique to analyze her spirit and realize that she needs to be put in the spirit water to try and heal. And what's so interesting in terms of the Karuk connection there is that one of Karuk's friends is a fire sage named Nyatha, who is a Bonti tribe member who has that same firebending technique that the shaman healer has, and that the books also reveal that Karuk with Nyatha did lots of research on the spirits in the libraries of the Bonti tribe. So the biggest repository of spiritual information in the world, Karuk did his research there. So realistically, he probably is one of the few avatars who just kind of looked back at the history and was aware of like, oh, even without her talking to me, I'm aware that the spirit that the avatar, you know, is at one with, the name is Rava. So I just love that connection overall. And then the final thing that I'll mention here is just the Welcome to Republic City game. So just before Legend of Korra came out back in 2012, they put up this game online as a sort of like teaser to introduce you to some of the aspects of Korra, so you're familiar with the world and stuff like that. And you could click around in this game and get basically fact file type things on a lot of characters. And Avatar Karuk was one of them, so you get it here. Avatar Karuk, male, age unknown, former avatar. His main quote is, "You must actively shape your own destiny and the destiny of the world," which is what he says to Aang, of course, and it fits in with his whole idea of him being the negligent avatar. So of course his advice would be, don't make the same mistake I did, be active and shape the world. So we do know his name. This actually line here is what reveals to us what his age was. Avatar Karuk was originally a waterbender born in the Northern Water Tribe almost 500 years before Korra. So this is what confirmed it to us. So because of Korra, we knew going in she was going to be 17. So you can work backwards of like before Korra. Okay, so we know because of, you know, Korra was set 70 years after Avatar. That confirms to us what age Aang died at. He died at 166, so we know that. We know Roku lived to be 70, we know Kyoshi lived to be 230. So you add all that together and you realize, oh, that adds up to like 466. Almost 500 years before, so not fully 500. So let's say 499. 499 minus 466 is 33. At most, he was 33, and that's the kind of logic people use to figure out his age. And then in Rise of Kyoshi, they confirmed he lived to be 33. So that was great. You know, the fans figured it out. They committed to it later on. He is sort of the avatar who lived to be the youngest that we know of right now. And now we sort of know why. Even without going into Shadow of Kyoshi, we sort of got that idea of like he drove himself into an early grave, just putting everything into trying to get Umi back, and like the dangers of the spirit world, fighting spirits. Of course, that would lead to a short life. But anyway, we continue on here. We get a description that reveals a little bit more to us. During his time as the Avatar, the world was at peace, with no major conflicts to deal with. Karuk spent most of his time searching both the physical and spirit world for worthy opponents to fight. His legendary sparring matches became the stuff of legend, yet no one could beat him. Karuk was brash and arrogant, and not everyone loved him. In fact, there was one spirit who plotted to punish Karuk for his pompous ways. Karuk was all set to wed a beautiful woman named Umi when something disastrous happened. Ko the Face Stealer lured Umi into the spirit world where he stole her face and trapped her forever. Karuk was furious and entered the spirit world to defeat the giant spirit. Alas, he could not, because if he destroyed the spirit, he would destroy the love of his life, the beautiful Umi. So there's extra detail just in this description added to the story we got in Escape from the Spirit World. That, okay, he went there every year on the anniversary of their wedding to try and get her back, but every time he would face Ko, he would always be left with this choice of, do I kill Ko, but in the process, you know, destroy what's left of Umi? Can I do that? And inevitably, he couldn't. And that in a way is very defining of Karuk, bringing in a little bit of the shadow of Kyoshi stuff. Of there was never any other solution or option or technique. During his era, it was just, I can either choose to fight and kill the spirit, or just leave, like not be forced into a situation where I can't kill it and have to leave and just try again somehow, and just, is there another way? But during his era, there wasn't. And that's sort of the tragedy of him. He was this amazing talent as a bender. He had amazing charisma. He could get people to like him, as we saw. But seemingly, he wasn't active in the world. And the only major thing in his life was dealing with this thing right towards the end. But there is a whole missing section right in the middle of his life. What went on there? Surely he wasn't just absolutely like not doing anything as the Avatar during all of this time. And that is exactly the case, as we're going to get into here when we step into the two novels about Kyoshi, which of course give us insight into the era before her also. So in the first book, The Rise of Kyoshi, we don't learn a lot specifically about Karuk. It's more of teases of more to come. The Shadow of Kyoshi is where we get the full Karuk backstory, but there are some nice things that are important to note from the first book, in that it sets up what will be a big part of the second book, that being Kyoshi's opinion on Karuk. So throughout the first book, he's always talked about by his companions, people who knew him, as just not the best, most active avatar, not the best avatar at all, a skilled bender, you know, talented in some ways, charismatic, but ultimately the impression she gets is this ineffective character who also seemingly did a lot of stuff that was sort of problematic. One of the most notable parts where they directly point out something sort of Karuk did is that one of the main reasons Kyoshi at the start of the book is really considered like, I think you might be the Avatar, is that when she's in the middle of this sort of game that she's playing with a bunch of the other people who work at the mansion, and they're singing these sort of poems and songs where they sort of allude to someone that they really like, Kyoshi bursts out with this perfectly like constructed song/poem, and Kelsang is listening to it and he's like, wait, Kyoshi, how on earth do you know that song? And he reveals to her later in private that the only people who should know that song are me and Karuk, because Karuk wrote that song. He was going to give that to Heiran because he liked her. I stopped him from giving it to her because she was just recently married at the time. But the fact that you know it, to me, is probably the biggest insight that you are the Avatar, that you remember this thing. It also sort of becomes like a thing where, like, partly the reason Kyoshi knows it and says it at that point in time is that Kyoshi, of course, at this stage in the book has a crush on Rangi, who is Heiran's daughter. So there's that sort of connection of like, Karuk had a crush on Heiran, and then Kyoshi has a crush on Rangi, and it's noted that Heiran and Rangi look very alike, of course. So the song sort of describing them is actually like about both of them. So that's like a big thing of like, Kyoshi finds out that, wait, Karuk was going to give a love poem to a married woman to potentially break up the marriage, and she's just like, no, I do not like this guy at all. So when she later is found out to be the Avatar, she just really wants no part of talking to him. Everything she hears about with him is either people being like, oh, if only things had turned out differently with Karuk. The companions blamed themselves. His friend Nyatha blames himself. But Kyoshi's just like, Karuk handles his own stuff. Stop talking about him. But a big plot point for the second book is that Kyoshi needs to communicate with Karuk. If she wants to communicate with any of the other avatars, she has to first communicate with Karuk. But because of her like resentments towards him, because she sees him as this ineffective avatar who just made lots of mistakes, kind of like herself, she doesn't see any value in talking to him. So a lot of the second book is about building up the point of like, Karuk has the answers that you need. Give him a chance. And like us as the audience, her opinions on Karuk are going to completely change once she gets the answers. The other stuff we get from this book is the answers to what Karuk, in being inactive as the Avatar, actually did sort of let build up in the world. What is Kyoshi dealing with currently? What is the world dealing with currently? And you can sort of blame to a degree on an Avatar in the past generation not getting involved in. In this case, it is the rise of the Dao Fei, bandits and pirates across the Earth Kingdom and water tribes and so on. Really organized groups of bandits. Like the way to view Dao Fei is like sort of like honorable bandits. They have really strict codes of honor, and they're so heavily and structured against like people who abide by the law. They don't like world leaders at all, and they view anyone who is part of their Dao Fei group as being a brother, a sister, and they have all these like traditions and so on. There is a camaraderie to it, but some of the Dao Fei groups do take it way too far, to the point where there have been extraordinarily violent groups led by tyrants, basically, and some of them do absolutely need to be taken down. So that is basically the result of Karuk not being active in the world, dealing with the four nations. That rose up. And the book very much gets across this idea that the people who did have to attempt to deal with that were Karuk's companions. So Kelsang, Jianzhu, Heiran, and now Kyoshi, I suppose, now that she's the Avatar, they have to deal with like runaway Dao Fei in the Earth Kingdom, and in the pirates in the seas, like near the water tribes and so on. And we get across that his companions were sort of forced to develop these grisly reputations, because without the Avatar, the name of the Avatar there to sort of be that perfect diplomat and potentially bring things to a conclusion more peacefully, they were forced into situations where things had to get violent. And so that's where Jianzhu developed his grisly reputation of being this, his nickname is Jianzhu, the Grave Digger of Zulu Pass, which initially he kind of explains it away as like, it's because there's lots of bodies after like a big battle, and I use my earth bending to sort of give them like peaceful graves, so their bodies wouldn't be just like completely all over the place, and like it was seen as this more respectful thing. But then at the end of the book, it's revealed that no, he buried like 5,000 Dao Fei alive with his earth bending. This terrible act of just killing. He is responsible for that because he became so frustrated in dealing with the Dao Fei that he eventually just snapped to deal with them. Now, you understand it to a degree, because these are the Yellownecks that we're talking about here, the most violent group who just kill at will, that they just oppose anyone who doesn't agree with their own Dao Fei ideals and just kill everyone. And so that's what he's responsible for. Kelsang has a grisly reputation of his own, because he created like tornadoes out at sea to try and stop and defend villages on the coasts from the pirate fleets, and he ended up like inadvertently kind of killing people. And so that's why he is seen in sort of a lower position by a lot of the air temples and so on, that he would be an elder monk if not for that sort of spiritual taint that is now upon him, because he has killed people, and it was just to protect people. But because Karuk wasn't around, that's what had to happen. Heiran has killed people in Agni Kai's to get the position of headmistress. They kind of talk about that, and there's like rumors that swirl around her. So there's just this idea that things just became tougher, a little bit darker in the era after Karuk died, just without that, just the name of the Avatar there to make things a little bit smoother. Things were just that little bit tougher, and things went wrong. That's the way it's presented. And I think they do a great job. Like, obviously in the first book, it's primarily you learning a little bit about Karuk through meeting his companions and seeing how they've changed from clearly being a team Avatar in the past to now seeing these kind of more, you know, broken individuals here, where they were clearly more hopeful in the past when Karuk was around, but now they blamed themselves for what happened to him and him not being as effective and turning out the way he did, and also what happened to them themselves, and especially with just the way the plot of that book goes, with like Jonju becoming the villain. He kills Kelsang and nearly kills Heiran, and the companion group just like explodes, and it's like, oh, if Karuk had survived, maybe this group wouldn't have gone this way. And it's just the stress of Jonju feeling like he needs to, in a way, be that replacement, in a way, almost, for the Avatar. He needs to have that impact of having that control around the world from a political point of view, and just the desperate things that he does to make things right in his mind. He's a fantastic character, but you see that so much of the character that he is sort of formed from like what he has to do without the Avatar around. Kelsang is obviously much more kind of innocent. He's kept out of a lot of the darker aspects of what happened, but Heiran ends up sort of just kind of going along with what Jonju is doing, and gets herself, like, she feels like she has lost her honor by realizing in the end what Jonju has done to make all of this happen. And for the most part, like, that's a lot of the Karuk stuff in the first book. The book does end with Karuk coming to, you know, spiritually to visit Kyoshi and saying, I need your help. And it's just a cliffhanger ending of the book, and Kyoshi's like, Karuk? The second book reveals that this is just Karuk basically, I need your help. You need to help, like, in the process of establishing our connection. That for an Avatar to communicate with their past life, there has to be a willingness on both sides. And Kyoshi right now is unwilling because of how she views Karuk. Fairly, unfairly, obviously, as we later learn, it is a little bit unfairly, but the way he is presented, no one's saying anything for the better about him. And I think that's what's so interesting about the book, and that you wonder, like, oh, he clearly wants to talk to Kyoshi about something from his past that is now going to come up in the present day. What is it going to be? Is this finally going to be the big reveal? That was the setup before we had the second book, and then it delivered. So yeah, let's move from the rise of Kyoshi into the shadow of Kyoshi. So most of the book, as I said, focuses on, you know, kind of Fire Nation politics, plot point, but also Kyoshi trying to investigate what has happened to Yoon. Something spiritual has happened with this spirit called Father Glowworm, who Kyoshi knows has a connection to Karuk. It's a known thing that Karuk fought Glowworm in the past. There's a connection between the two. So she's going to need to communicate with Karuk at some point to find out anything about Glowworm. No one seems to know anything except Karuk. So the book is like, you don't want to, you really don't like Karuk, but you have to talk to him. He's the only one who knows about this. And so when she finally makes the connection, we get it in kind of sections. We first get the happy section of Karuk's life, which isn't really the answers to the question Kyoshi wants. And then later on in the book, she finally is more open, connects to him again, and then we get the darker, different section of Karuk's backstory that completely changes how we view the character. So the first section of the backstory basically covers the happy era of Karuk's life, and it definitely fits in with a lot of what we learned already. The idea of him traveling around the place, you know, doing these tests of strength, bending contests, showing off a little bit around the world, and just sort of enjoying himself in more of an era of peace right at the start of his era. They obviously include the companions into it more. Like, obviously the companions were only introduced in the books, so this is where they sort of show the origin story of how does Karuk meet Jonju, how does he meet Kelsang, how does he meet Heiran. That's what we get here. So they quickly cover, like, okay, he's introduced to the Northern Water Tribe and all the other delegates from the nations as the Avatar, and he starts his training, and it's just established that they know straight away he's an extremely talented bender because he's like a master water bender so quickly. He goes then into his earthbending training, and he adapts to that very, very quickly. He learns all of the elements easily. but he questions his teachers, and they sort of view him as being a little bit of a rebellious sort of spirit here. But I love what they do here in terms of why he questions his teachers, because he views him like he's the Avatar. I can bend 4 elements, but my teachers are teaching me as if it's 4 completely separate things, that I should be 4 different people when I bend each, element. I'm a waterbender when I'm waterbending, and then I have to switch completely over and do something very different to be an earthbender. When his perspective is more of like, why can't I do earthbending with a little bit of a water tribe twist on it? Why can't I just include all 4 in one and really have that Avatar fluid, all 4 elements are connected type style? And so he realizes that, okay, I can be more free after my training is done. So he agrees to just like, okay, I won't be as questioning, as rebellious. I'll learn, and then I'll make my changes. So immediately there's this kind of wisdom, like kind of rebellious wisdom here to him of like, he can see some of the flaws in the strict ways of the masters, but he goes ahead with his training. He makes his first connection with Jianzhu, who of course is revealed to also kind of feel similarly about, doing things in an overly strict fashion. No, we should try and incorporate more of the teachings of all the 4 nations together. So they begin to play Pai Sho together, and they form a friendship, a kind of unlikely friendship, given that Jianzhu is more of a serious character, and then Karuk is this like charismatic kind of ladies' man type character. But it works together. He's exactly the sort of foil that Karuk needs. So the 2 of them begin to have sort of fun together over the rest of Karuk's training, with the idea being that if they can get their hands on a bison, they have complete freedom. So they go to try and take a bison to go for a joyride, but the monk to catch them is Kelsang. And so the punishment for Jianzhu and Karuk is that they're going to have to be forever like escorted by Kelsang. He's going to be there to sort of monitor them the whole time. But he ends up becoming friends with everyone, joining the group. There's some tensions early on because he's a little bit more serious, but they quickly realize that they are actually going to get on quite well. And then Heiran ends up joining the group after a little bit of a kind of mix-up, I suppose. Originally it was meant to be an adult man from her clan, but he got sick, so she got sort of drafted in as like a temporary replacement. But Karuk was like, ooh, attractive female firebender on my team, let's make that permanent. And so that's how the team was formed. And you get some very fun stuff early on about how like he immediately pursues her in terms of a romantic relationship, and publicly to everyone she's like, no, we have to stick to our duty here, we're part of a team. But then she says to him in private that, okay, no relationship while we're on duty, implying that maybe there can be something when we're off duty. So that's where Karuk actually saw that there was potentially something between him and Heiran. But it still begs the question, why would he so soon after finding out she's married try and give her that love poem? What was going on in his life at that point in time? But we get an explanation for that. And that's what's so good about this in terms of setup across the 2 books. So at this point he's free, he's done his training, he has his team, and this is where you really get his philosophy. Already he has this unique way of like the bending disciplines aren't just 4 separate disciplines. They should be merged together to form, as the Avatar, this incredible style. So he's already a super talented bender, he's mastered the 4 elements. And then he asks his teammates for further training in their disciplines. He asked Jianzhu for earthbending training, Heiran for firebending training, and Kelsang for airbending training. Even though arguably, because of his talent level, he's probably better than them, he still asks for their unique approach in training, because his view on things, his sort of mantra on things is that like he challenges himself constantly to get better, and that he views everyone as an opportunity to improve. And so this helps to sort of clarify that like those bending tests where he challenges people, yes, there's an element of arrogance and showing off to it, but it's like if he honestly encountered someone that was very different, he would learn from them. And so he comes out at the end of his training as being one of the most talented benders we've ever seen, basically. He'll take knowledge from everywhere. A prodigy who still does the hard work and puts the time in. He gives the Pai Sho analogy, because he's very good at Pai Sho, of saying that the difference between the masters and just the very talented players is that the masters play so many more games than the very talented players. And so it's just a case of talent plus experience is what makes you a master more than anything else. And so he never rests on his laurels, basically, is Kuruk's philosophy. And I like that in what they said, they never got across the idea that he was just like over the top. Like yes, he was arrogant, but it was because he was truly talented and always wanted to improve, and did improve. So where does everything turn? And so they get to this point where he just acknowledges that it's so great. Life is amazing with my friends. We're learning together. We're going to be such a talented group. We'll change the world together. And he realizes that this is true when Kelsang apparently seemingly becomes one of the first people of the era to meditate into the spirit world. And he views this as this sign that this team is going to accomplish everything. So he's like, Kelsang, show me, guide me into the spirit world also. We have to act on this immediately. And this is where everything changes. So when Kuruk goes into the spirit world, obviously he meditates in there, so his spirit separates from his body. In the spirit world, he has no bending. He is separated from Kelsang, and on his own, he notices this dark spirit, angry, slamming its head, trying to dig through this kind of icy pond in the spirit world. And just before the spirit attacks him and he wakes up again in the physical world, he notices the location that this kind of rift between worlds, where this spirit is trying to get to in the physical world. And he notices that it's the exact same location that he and his friends are sort of meditating from into the spirit world. And that if this spirit gets through, with how angry and aggressive and powerful it is, it will slaughter everyone. He can see the anger in it. So when he wakes up, he immediately grabs Kelsang's glider, heads off to the location he saw on the other side, and goes through this rift into the spirit world, body and spirit, so he can use his bending. And he fights this dark spirit, and he wins. It's a long fight. He takes injuries in it, but in the end, he wins. And it seems like, oh great, like Kuruk saved everyone from this dark spirit. The twist, though, is that this victory has an impact on him, and this is probably one of the most crucial pieces of information in the book, is that basically in killing a dark spirit, it has this sort of like blowback effect on him. His own spirit gets impacted as well, that in killing a spirit, he almost like kills off a part of his own spirit. And I think it's some aspect of it being a dark spirit, and that for you to clash with a spirit, you sort of merge energies to a degree. So as he delivers that final blow, yes, he kills the spirit, but it takes a little bit of him with it as it goes, I think is the idea that you get from it. So he realizes what's happening here, that like as he kills this spirit, like he's basically lost a bit of his life force, that he's already lost a chunk of how long he could potentially live as the Avatar. And this seems fine, like okay, it takes him a long time to recover from this fight, because like he's found foaming at the mouth, he doesn't talk for days, he has this like chill forever that he can't seem to warm himself up again. And he's a water tribe man, so he's used to the cold, but something has happened here to him. And the only thing that seems to be able to sort of heat him up again, bring that like light back into his life, is when he's given like a bit of alcohol, like during his recovery. And then this maid comes in and develops a connection, and he sleeps with her. That seems to, remind him of life again. And so this is where he sort of develops these like vices of being like the alcohol and women as being the only way to recover from these dark spirit encounters. And so a second one happens then. He goes back to journeying with his friends, everything's happy again, but then a second spirit incursion comes in. He doesn't tell his friends about the details about the first one, and he doesn't include them on the trip to go after the second one in the Fire Nation. And so again, he goes into the spirit world, he kills this spirit quicker this time, But again, the same thing happens. It has an effect on his spirit. It has an effect on his soul. He takes injuries in the fight once again. But this time, as he crawls out of the fight, he meets Nyahatha, who is a fire sage from the Banti tribe. And so he, of course, like the shaman healer from beginnings, has that firebending energy analysis technique. He performs it on Karuk, and this is what confirms to us that yes, Karuk, you're out of the running for longest ever living avatar already. I can heal your spirit to a degree with this technique, but this has done permanent damage to you. And it confirms that, like, if he fights more spirits, he is going to take lifespan away from himself. He is going to get more and more injured as he goes on. And it continues. So Nyahatha joins Karuk as like his only companion on these sort of secret missions to stop spirits from entering the physical world and killing lots of people, because they're all dark spirits that's happening here. So this is this era of his life where he sort of separates himself from his friends. They're off doing their things. He still has faith that they will be amazing on their own, but he has to keep them away from this. They can't attack these spirits, or something that happened to him will happen to them. And this is where you get this idea of like Karuk's weaknesses are obviously his vices, but also that he doesn't like his friends getting hurt, and he'll do anything to stop that from happening, including sacrificing himself. And that's basically what he does here. He removes himself from their lives basically at this point, and devotes himself completely to fighting these spirits, investigating these spirits, and eventually hunting these spirits. He's already the greatest hunter in the Four Nations. Now he's going to become the greatest hunter in the Four Nations and the spirit world, because he's going to become a spirit hunter here to make this happen and prevent these even quicker. The last two ones were sort of desperate attempts to stop the spirit just as it was about to make its way through. He has to preempt them now. So he and Nyahatha go to the Banti tribe's libraries, the biggest repository of spiritual knowledge in the world, the most ancient in the world. And this is where he tries to investigate what's happening. What is the cause of all of these spirit attacks? How are these like sudden rifts between the worlds coming about? And most importantly, is there any way to stop these spirits without having to kill them, without having to kill himself in the process, basically? And there's this very tragic line that is just like, he looked for a technique, but the technique obviously hadn't been invented yet. And it's clearly referencing Unalaq's spirit bending technique, which if Karuk had that would solve everything. He'd be able to just pacify the spirit and turn it light again and resolve these issues like that, because he's talented enough to do a technique like that. But it doesn't exist yet and won't be invented for like, 400 and a bit years after this event. Then it will come into fruition and be helpful for Korra. But right now, that technique doesn't exist, and all he can do is fight. But he's the most suited avatar in the world ever to do it, because of how talented he is, because of his skill with bending, how much he's trained and practiced. Very few other avatars, I think, could go up against this many spirits and fight them and hold them back like he did. And so that's what happens. He eventually, after more and more of these fights, discovers the cause behind it. It's Father Glowworm. It's the spirit that was the one in the first book who revealed between Yoon and Kyoshi which one was the avatar. This is the spirit that Jeonju mentioned, that, oh, you fought with Karuk in the past. So this is the spirit Kyoshi needs to learn about, because this is the spirit who took Yoon away. Jeonju betrays Yoon by feeding Yoon to this spirit as payment for finding out who's the avatar, and this is basically the plot of The Shadow of Kyoshi, investigating what has happened between Yoon and Father Glowworm, and Karuk is the one who has the information on Glowworm. So Glowworm is revealed to be Father Glowworm, the World Borer. So it can bore holes between the physical world and the spirit world at will. They're kind of small ones that he can just sort of leave open, just barely. And so that's what he's been doing. He's been making a lot of these kind of holes between the worlds And he hasn't had any problem with other spirits coming to sort of like widen these holes that he's made and open them. He's fine with causing a little bit of chaos in the human world because it gives him a distraction to take some humans and eat them, because that's his whole thing. He wants to consume a human here and there to increase his power. And so Karuk realizes this is the one behind it. If I can stop this spirit, we can stop it from happening, because then like the main two spirit portals are closed, of course, and that will mean that there's not enough spirit portals for other spirits to get through. So eventually he has a confrontation with Glowworm. But this is where they bring up this very, very interesting dynamic. Glowworm is an extremely powerful spirit, and his name isn't just what people call him. It's his own name. He is aware that that is his name, and he can tell it to people. He introduces himself as Father Glowworm. And so by having a formal introduction with Father Glowworm, they basically, the book says that like it effectively creates a curse, and it sort of like intertwines Glowworm and Karuk's energies at this point. That you've made a formal introduction with a powerful named spirit. You've almost written a contract with it here. And basically the curse is that like if Karuk tells anyone about Glowworm, so if he brings allies to fight against Glowworm, they will all basically suffer ill fortune. So to save everyone, he never informs anyone about Glowworm and handles this himself. And this leads to a one-on-one confrontation, cataclysmic battle between full-powered Avatar and massively powerful spirit. They both grievously wound each other in this fight, to the point where Glowworm is nowhere near as powerful as he once was. He basically goes from being super powerful spirit to just being sort of notable spirit. That's how much damage Karuk does to Glowworm. And they don't describe the exact injury that Karuk suffers, but the idea is that they say Karuk would also never be the same after this fight. So again, Karuk, I think the idea is this injury takes him from being one of the most powerful avatars of all time just to being like powerful Avatar. That he is not going to be able to maybe fight these spirits anymore if they happen. But he's wounded Glowworm enough to where Glowworm won't be able to create as many rifts, or, you know, he stopped the spirit incursions by doing this. So he hasn't defeated for all time Glowworm, but he's fulfilled his mission here fundamentally. So things should be okay. He's not going to live a massively long life after this, but things should be better now that he's stopped the spirit incursions, right? But of course the curse with Glowworm still persists. So, and he still feels the same way he feels after all of this. He's isolated himself from his friends, and because his friends, when they've sort of encountered him, have only ever seen him like, you know, doing all this drinking to attempt to recover from these incidents, such as the impact that they have, sleeping around with women and so on. Like Heiran especially, really, like her opinion of him really goes down seeing him like this. And this is where they bring up the idea that like he would sleep during like diplomatic meetings, the ones that he actually did attend. He left most of that stuff to Jianzhu to do, because he was the political master within the group. So that's, you know, why everyone views Karuk as being inactive, because they'd see him sleeping at these meetings, drunk at these meetings even. But none of them knew the full story of why he was like that. It was this broken avatar who was forced himself to kill all these spirits to protect humans from them. And the only thing he could do to feel normal again was to indulge himself in these vices, which isolated himself even further from his friends. And this happened even after the, you know, quote unquote, you know, victory, I suppose, relatively okay conclusion to the fight with Glowworm. And it's at this point, this is realistically where he then meets Umi in the, I suppose, I don't know if it's a years after this or just like immediately after this, but at some point after the fight with Glowworm, this is clearly where he meets Umi. The book does not clarify anything about like connecting the Umi stuff to this. The book pretty much stops with, okay, Kyoshi, you wanted to know about Glowworm. I've just told you my story right up to the point with Glowworm. And then he goes on and explains, Yoon, like, you can't be so possessed by a spirit that the spirit controls your actions. The spirit can alter you, it can improve you in some ways, but if Yoon is angry at the world, it's because Yoon is angry at the world. You have to realize that Glowworm is not possessing Yoon in the way you think he is. So you have to realize, you have to face him with that acknowledgement that he may be more powerful because of Glowworm, but it's not, there's nothing you can do spiritually to just depossess him and end it like that. And obviously we found out that Yoon defeated, as he was taken away, defeated the now depowered Glowworm with the, you know, Karuk did most of the work, Yoon finishes the job here, and it's revealed that Glowworm didn't like take over Yoon. Yoon ate Glowworm, so that's the kind of conclusion with Glowworm. And as Yoon dies in this book, Glowworm, I suppose, also dies and is, I suppose, reborn but purified going forward after that. So, that's the whole Glowworm stuff ended. But we're talking about Karuk here. So, how do we then attempt to connect the other big thing? Because, like, basically everything with Karuk that we know about before these books is in relation to the Umi and Ko situation that happens later on in his life. But this book doesn't bring those up. Kyoshi asks about it. She's like, what about the rest of your memories, Karuk? And he's like, oh, after I left my friends, there's nothing more to tell. So clearly he doesn't want to talk about these even more tragic events with Kyoshi and just reveal more sadness to her. So this is where he clearly, okay, he meets Umi. And I would love to know now, like, what sort of a person was Umi? Because in the state that Karuk was in after this, with just, you know, this avatar sort of falling to his addictions, more or less, what sort of woman was Umi to sort of snap Karuk out of that? She must have been this incredibly strong person and have seen the good through all of the bad that was going on with Karuk at this time, to start that relationship with him and to make him, at this later point in his life, after everything that's happened, reconsider and become a better person, later on in life, improve. That really speaks highly of her character, and I would have loved to have had the book covered a little bit more to see the exact type of character that she is. He's Northern Water Tribe, she's Southern Water Tribe, so she'd be a little bit more, I suppose, freer in her actions, not as bound by traditions. So she might have been just a little bit more open in terms of talking to him and just be like, you need to stop this if you want to be with me, or something like that. But the happiness that she must have brought back into his life must have been, he talks about the chill after fighting the spirits. It must have been, meeting Umi was that, that light, that warmth back into his life. And so he changes after this completely, and he's kind of almost back to normal. He knows he's not going to live very long still. There's no cure for that. He's fought those spirits. They've taken their toll on him. He's had the fight with Glowworm that's taken an even further toll on him. And you sort of wonder, did he tell her about Glowworm and inadvertently include her in the curse, which is why misfortune happens to her at the wedding? Or did he specifically not mention that to her, and then Ko is just this whole other rogue element that comes into play? Because what was said back in Escape from the Spirit World was that he said, like, Ko punished me for my past mistakes. And I actually love how they played on that. In that I always almost remembered it as, like, punished me for being inactive as the Avatar. But no, he just says past mistakes. And Karuk would obviously view the fact that he was sort of forced to kill spirits as being his mistakes. And I can see Ko basing most of his reasoning for why he did what he did as being like, you're a spirit hunter, Karuk. You killed my kind, lots of my kind. They may have been dark, but you still killed them and hunted them. This creates much more of a reasoning behind that. He thinks he's past that stage of his life, and then it comes back up again. Another powerful spirit has attacked him, but this time, not him personally, and Ko doesn't challenge him to a fight. He instead attacks the people close to him, which is the thing that upsets Karuk most of all. One of Karuk's big things is protecting the people he cares about. That's why he never involved his friends in this darker section of his life. Only Nyatha was involved in that. And he specifically wouldn't want Umi involved in this. but Ko somehow realized that this was the way to get at Karuk, and hit him as hard as possible. And I'd love to know more insight into that, of like, was it Ko directly punishing him for like, oh, you weren't a great avatar, or was it more because you attacked spirits like me? And I think now the interpretation has to be more about you attacked spirits like me. And now that you're kind of weakened and you won't have the power to come after me as hard as you once did, I'll take from you what you took from the spirits type thing. That's what Ko kind of always has felt like, this sort of almost like petty, mischievous spirit who just wants to get one over on everyone. And that's very interesting to me. And it's very tragic that he went down this dark road, found happiness right towards the end, and then it was also ripped away from him right at the end. And then the same thing, I suppose, happened again. He had to once again make big trips into the spirit world to fight spirits, powerful spirits. But this time, killing the spirit isn't even a solution. If he kills the spirit, he kills what's left of Umi. And that's just terrible. And it's really crazy to just think about that. Like, the same thing happens to again. He's forced into a situation where he has to destroy his body, destroy his soul, every year on the anniversary, go after Ko and realize, I don't have a technique to separate what's left of you from Ko. I can kill you, I can kill Ko, but maybe I can't because he's weakened after the fight with Glowworm. Maybe he's not even strong enough to defeat Ko, only fight him to like some sort of a draw. And that's the tragedy of this. The fight with Glowworm impacts Karuk enough that he may not be strong enough to defeat someone like Ko. And Ko just kind of gloats about it to Aang, that like, oh, something about taking the face of someone he loved, that he speaks about it so casually, when to Karuk it's like the biggest thing in the world. And that just adds to just the devastation of what happened to Karuk. And yeah, and I think that's the idea here, is just that he already wasn't going to live very long, and then he had to do the thing that already limited his life at the end of his life. And so he died at 33 because of just wear and tear on his body from physical injuries to his spirit, and I suppose just mentally as well. Like, this guy got broken down, and like finally something happy right at the end, and it goes away. And he'd sort of like, in his mind, I suppose, maybe pushed his friends away too far, and it was maybe over with them. And the mistakes, of course, of him, of like, if he had probably opened up a dialogue with his friends again, they probably would have been there for him, but he didn't want to involve them to in any way get them hurt by anything that happened. Because if he mentioned Glowworm, they'd be under the same sort of curse of like, they'd have misfortune happen to them as well. But it ended up happening sort of anyway. Like, Karuk reflecting on what happened with his friends is this shocking thing, that one of his friends kills one of his other friends and then nearly poisons Heiron as well. And at this point, by the end of the 2 books, Heiron's the only one left. And even then, she's nearly been killed like 2 or 3 times in the books. Absolutely crazy that, like, just such a tragic life that Karuk leads. But he is ultimately such a hero. He protected so many humans and was arguably one of the most active avatars for having such a short life. Once that spirit stuff got going, he had to devote himself 100% to that, to do the investigation, to do the training, to recover properly from it so he was ready for the next one. And it just kept happening, and he never, I suppose, truly got that happiness back. And it's just that contrast between everything going so well at the start of his life to just how downhill it all went afterwards. And yeah, like, I think it's like nearly a complete story with this character. I think I'd like to see Umi characterized some more, and just some of that, their relationship of like how we go from the broken Karuk after the fight with Glowworm to him meeting Umi and being better by the end. That to me is an arc for the character I would like to see, just to see, characterize Umi so she's not just Karuk's wife. That, I think that would be the thing to sort of complete and cap off Karuk's journey. And especially, like, I suppose, how exactly he died. I get the impression that, like, he probably came back from a spirit world journey one time and just did not have anything left, and that's probably how he died. That's the interpretation that I have on it, at least. So yeah, and then coming back to like the whole premise of this video, of like the way we looked at Karuk as fans before these two books versus the way we do it now. He was always the negligent avatar. He's always the character everyone brought up as who's the worst avatar of the ones we know. It kind of had to be him, just because of the way he was presented. He talked about it himself. How could you deny what even the avatar himself is saying, that he should have been better? He was arrogant. The world was at peace, but I didn't really try to do anything. Versus now, the fact that, oh yeah, that's true to a degree when we just talk about sort of the politics of the Four Nations and the rising of the Dao Fei and what he didn't get involved in. But he never talked about what he actually was doing all that time. He wasn't just sitting around. He was fighting spirits to protect people, to protect his friends. He kept it a secret from everyone. And he feels that it's this shameful thing that he did. Like, it's noted in the book that like Nyada and Karuk both sort of almost consider themselves criminals. Like, they have to keep it such a secret because they're killing spirits. As much as people understand, like, killing spirits to protect humans, it's fine. But so many people in the world have such a respect for spirits as like the deities of the world. You have your spiritual tribes, but even normal people at a certain point, and it's like, I've been hunting spirits for years, it's this like, what are you doing type thing. And you completely get it, but not many people in the world would get it. I think it is such a crazy thing just how like alone he was. It was just him and Yatha, and that's why that character actually is very interesting as well. When he like meets Heiron again and they sort of blame each other for Karuk turning out the way he did, and it's like, you know, the everyone involved like was just impacted by this like so heavily, and that's so interesting to consider. The final point I want to make here is the Yang Chen stuff with all of this, in that, okay, Karuk dealt with things in the way he had to, but why did he have to deal with this stuff in the first place? And this is why it's so significant that Kyoshi gets her opportunity to speak to Yang Chen at the end of The Shadow of Kyoshi, and she talks about things to Kyoshi that like, you think that I am the greatest avatar ever and that Karuk was one of the worst. You think better of him now because you now know the full story. But the reason Karuk had to deal with all those dark spirits in his era was because I was the one who made them dark. And that is such a massive reveal that it immediately shatters your perception of Yang Chen, as well as us now having a completely different view on Karuk. Yang Chen made mistakes too. She obviously changed the world with her treaties between nations, and she really had an effect on the world stage and is known worldwide as an avatar who did have a positive effect on the world. But when it came to dealing with the spirits, that's where she struggled a bit, and she notices that like, yeah, I was consistent in the mistakes I constantly made. Anything that came to an agreement with a spirit, I always had to settle it in a way where I settled on the side of the humans, and it was always like, spirits, you go back to the spirit world and we'll try and be respectful of the area you look over in the physical world. And it was always a deal she could never fully guarantee that would be kept, because it's one that would last for generations. She couldn't guarantee that even the people that were right next to her could uphold it, let alone people generations and generations from now. That she didn't have the tools, the ability to fully, you know, make a better negotiation with the spirit or deal with it better. And so those promises got broken over time. Those spirits became dark, angry, wrathful, and turned into the dark spirits that attacked the world during Karuk's era, after Yang Chen. And so, because they only came up in Karuk's era, no one would ever think that they are coming from what happened in Yang Chen's time, but they do. And I think the biggest thing of all is that Karuk is aware of this. He knows that that Yang Chen's kind of deals are why he has to face these spirits, but he never publicly made any statement about it. He always kept it secret. So, you know, Yang Chen basically says the boy considered it like his responsibility to protect my reputation. That like he sacrificed his reputation as an avatar so that Yang Chen would always be remembered as one of the great avatars, so that future avatars always had something to look up to, and that it wasn't a case of like, oh, look at Karuk, this avatar who just killed some spirits and that's about it, and the previous avatar caused that, and as much as he did some other stuff, you know, mistakes are mistakes. So he wanted to make sure Yang Chen was respected so much that he was okay with being known as that bad avatar, so long as he could take on the problems that were ultimately Yang Chen's. And that's a kind of very selfless kind of decision on his behalf. And it's why it's so significant when, after he communicates with Kyoshi and tells her like his backstory, gives her the advice about Glowworm, and Kyoshi thanks him for giving her this advice. Like, I'm glad I was finally able to meet you, and I truly do mean that, Karuk, and that her opinion on him has changed. It's such a great moment in the book where he's kind of like, Kyoshi notes his like physical response to this, and he's like, his shoulders like relaxed, like it was such a relief for him to be like thanked by the present avatar, that he had all of these doubts of like, he considers himself a terrible avatar while he was active, and now he's considering himself a terrible avatar as the past life, because he can barely get the current avatar to consider communicating with him. So what a relief it is to him that she can communicate with him, and he can give her actual advice that she appreciates, and it just gives him a lot more confidence that he feels more like a valid part of the avatar cycle. I think it was just overall like so well done for the character, and the fact that I can now talk for like over an hour about Avatar Karuk, this character who we barely knew anything about before, speaks volumes of how well done the books are with this character, and how with the books you have the capacity to take anything in the Avatar universe and really heavily expand on it. There were so many aspects of this that were explored so well. The proper introduction of like the Bonte tribe into canon was fantastic. The details that they went into about the spirits and the different types of spirit possession, Glowworm being this a spirit with like an ability to bore between the worlds, and the details surrounding Karuk and like the tainting of his spirit and the impact that has, that as he kills a spirit, it almost takes a bit of him with it, and that's how his lifespan lowers to the point that he dies at 33. Fantastic reveal, and I'm so glad now that the character can actually be discussed properly. He's not forever going to be, oh yeah, Karuk, the worst avatar, and it's more like, wow, Karuk, like what a complicated avatar, a hero, but also he has all these flaws, these mistakes. And that's just fantastic, that now Karuk and Yang Chen both can be discussed with a little bit more nuance to them now. And what a success that is for the book, taking two characters who you felt you knew exactly, but you didn't know the full story. Like Yang Chen, we already had a sense for, like, she wasn't fully perfect because of the whole rift situation with Old Iron, but I liked how they added more to that it was not just that one incident, but in general her with spirits. That was her weakness when it came to sort of like diplomacy. And even that, you can't blame her too badly for that, because most avatars struggle when it comes to, you know, creating these deals, negotiating with spirits. It's tough, and she had a lot of it to do. She did the best she could, but her best created an environment where so much bad happened to Karuk. But I'm going to end it there. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on Avatar Karuk, now that we know pretty much his full story. What are your thoughts, especially on how we now incorporate the Umi and Ko stuff with Karuk into the deeper story that we now have from the novels? But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.